Well, hello there, friends and family out there on the YouTubes. I want to make a video about why Christians are traditionally at least pro-life, and I think that this could be actually a pretty fun video. There's no reason it needs to get nasty. We're all going to be polite starting... No, that goes for you too. So if you have crazy comments that you want to put below, the first question I'm going to ask you is, did you watch the whole video? So you better say yes. Okay. My mother was told to abort me. So she had health problems, and the doctor, her OBGYN, said that she should abort me because of a health thing. And I'm really grateful that she didn't, and proof that not all the times where a doctor says maybe you should think about it is it actually necessary. And so this is the kind of thing that's so weighty that it's worth scrutinizing. It's worth thinking about and talking about openly. And to be honest with you, I know that Facebook is probably a dumpster fire about this issue, but in reality, in real life, there's probably tons and tons and tons of you out there who have the strength and the maturity to talk about this with friends without freaking out, yelling, or getting crazy. And so I applaud you. Thank you, fellow human beings. Just good job being human. So I'm going to give you reasons why Christians are traditionally pro-life. Some of you may think it's political, and that's actually not true. So I'm going to clear up some confusion there. And you can skip to different parts of the video. I'm just going to give you a little index here. I'm going to start with Old Testament, then New Testament, then a little bit of science, and then talk about back and forth, maybe some arguments that pro-choicers may use, and I'll say here, a riddle to think about, I guess. And of course, I'm not going to cover it all, and I'm not going to cover it perfectly. I'm okay with that. That's okay. But this is going to be enough food for thought to start. So, for the Old Testament side, I'm going to start with Exodus 21, actually. So it says in Exodus 21, when men strive together and hit a pregnant woman so that her children come out, but there is no harm, the one who hit her shall surely be fined, as the woman's husband shall impose on him. He shall pay as the judges determine. But if there is harm, then you shall pay life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. Foot for foot. So, what does that mean? So there's two guys, they're fighting. Wife comes along trying to break the fight. Somebody accidentally hits her really hard, and it hits the belly area. If she ends up having a baby and there's no harm, then you just have to pay the fine for hitting the woman. But if there is harm, and the word here means harm, mischief, or evil, then it says you shall pay life for life. What does that mean? You can infer from that you have to pay for the life that's inside of her if you're the cause of that end. In other words, there's judgment on you societally for causing that pregnancy to terminate. That is God applying the lex talionis, the eye for an eye principle, which, by the way, there's maybe a whole separate video about why that was a net positive. But it was basically a way to say that you can enforce justice even for those who are not very high rank. So this is a golden example. We have here a fetus who is being protected by the lex talionis, and God is applying the life for life principle between a fetus and a grown man. So there is my first, this is Exhibit A of Old Testament pro-life leanings. We have a baby who's getting defended with this principle compared to a man. Then I'm going to go to Jeremiah 1. I'm skipping a lot, and I'm not going to cover it all. I'm going to go to Jeremiah 1. Of course, this is a famous one. Starting in verse 4, the word of the Lord came to me, saying, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you, and before you were born, I consecrated you. I appointed you a prophet to the nations. Now, in this verse, it sounds like in God's perspective, Jeremiah was consecrated as a prophet before he was even born, and God is taking the credit for forming him. Now, we understand that the baby has sort of a life of its own, and the mother's, protecting and producing and empowering this life. But God here is taking the credit. And so, in God's eyes, on the one hand, you protect a baby with this law against the effects of a man, life for life, but also at the same time, God's taking credit for forming this baby in the womb. And so we have God valuing the fetus, and I think that these verses imply the value and weight of humanity on this, which would be considered in God's eyes a life, a human life. Okay, we're going to skip ahead to the New Testament now. I'm only going to share with you one verse. It's a principle I'm gleaning from Matthew 25, starting in verse 37. Then the righteous will answer him, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you? The king will reply, truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. Now here in context, he's talking about brothers and sisters in the kingdom of God. But I'm going to gather from that principle that God wants us to take care of the least of these among us. And how much more least of these can you get than the woman in distress and her pregnancy and the baby, right? So these are very valuable in God's economy. And so we need to make sure that it's a top priority for us Christians to take care of women in distress and their babies. Babies are the least of these in many respects. They cannot advocate for themselves. They have no voice. They can feel pain, but they can't fight back. And there's no way to interview them. So this principle that Jesus is giving us is that we ought to take care of the least of these, and these little fetuses, little babies, are quite least of these in almost every respect. Now here we are going to just do some stats. Only 0.3% of abortions are for rape, apparently, according to this recent study I found. Maybe you can find different numbers for me, but 0.03% are related to incest, and 0.2% for protection of the mother's life. So why don't we, for the sake of argument, just put that off the table? Besides, what I'm trying to do is explain to you why Christians are pro-life and not really debate the nuances of the issue, which could go on all day. So now we're going to skip past stats and go to some science, little factoids that may help sway you. An embryo's heart begins to beat between 18 and 24 days after conception. Based on the development of the nervous system, a fetus is likely able to feel pain as early as 8 weeks after conception, and a huge chunk of abortions take place after that. So we need to come to grips with the fact that they're feeling the pain of what's happening to them. Embryos' brain waves can be detected 6 weeks after conception. 9 weeks after conception, a fetus is able to bend its fingers around an object in its hand and suck its thumb, and so. As much as persuasive as the clump of cells argument may be for you, the clumpiness disappears really quickly. They appear quite human very, very early. Now, some people bring up that ancient Christians were sometimes didn't believe that life began at conception. There were some Christians that believed that God gave the soul to a baby, the first time the mother felt the baby kick. And, I'm not going to trash them. They actually didn't have very much access to, science of babies and stuff like that, ultrasounds. But, these days we have high definition photographs, 3D sonograms, and we know a lot about what's going on in the womb. So we have a lot less of an excuse to be ignorant on this subject. I'm going to go to the support for women and adoption now. We, of course, would believe as the church that fostering, adopting, and taking care of women in distress is also a top priority. And to be honest with you, it's also true that a huge chunk of families that do adopt and foster are Christian families. But there's this idea that you should maybe be quiet, stop being so pro-life vocally with your words, unless you're going to be the one to take the baby, because otherwise you're just making noise, and it seems like empty rhetoric. I get why people say that, but here's just some thought. Here's an idea for you to think about. What if I told you that you should stop campaigning against forest fires unless you're willing to be a full-time park ranger? Or what if I said to you, you shouldn't fight crime with your words or advocate for safe communities unless you're willing to be a police officer full-time? Now you get where I'm going with this. You cannot be the hero of every situation. You have to choose something to do with your life, and your time's going to run out every day. The sun's going to go down, you're going to need to go to sleep. And you cannot full-time address every every significant problem that society faces. We cannot all be nurses, doctors, teachers, and lawyers, and police officers, firefighters, and park rangers, and sanitation workers, and plumbers. We can't do everything. So does it mean that since you only choose one subject matter, maybe two, to get really good at in terms of being a productive citizen and helping society, does that mean that you can no longer speak about the other issues? That doesn't seem fair, and it seems silly, and I think you would admit that if it wasn't such an emotional topic. Normally, you would give somebody, grant, because they already have it, you'd grant their right to speak out about any topic they choose, because they have a freedom to do that. And you may feel that it's annoying for someone to speak out against sex trafficking unless they're willing to work for the FBI and stop it. It's like, well, bro, that's not fair. I mean, anyone and everyone should be able to speak out against sex trafficking, whether they are or not in the FBI. You know, you can speak out against it and pray that God would bring swift justice and still be a full-time teacher or a full-time nurse and devote your vocational hours somewhere else. And that's like what normal people would do, and that's okay. Here's another thought for you to think about. I believe that the life of a baby is precious in the womb, and I believe that the law in New York that just passed recently is horrifying to me. It's morally a monstrosity. But there's a big chunk of people that, even of those watching this video, who might feel like, well, I believe that the life inside of the mother is a baby. I just don't know, when is it a human, and stuff like that. Your own brain didn't fully develop until well after puberty. I don't know if you've ever seen a newborn, but they're super dependent on the mother. They're very draining of the mother. So the parasite argument continues well after birth. Maybe even into the teen years, the parasite argument is valid. You're just draining the mother, Sorry, teenagers, we love you. We're just joking around. And there's the health argument, Let's put it like this. Let's say you're very sick and very poor, and there's a magic box that if you crush it, you'll be healthier, not perfect, but healthier, and you'll get a couple stacks of money. Like, it's not going to make you the richest person in the world, but it's going to help a lot. But there's like a 50% chance that when you crush this box, one of your close relatives is going to die. Would you crush it? And the reason I bring that up is because let's say you're not sure if life begins at conception. Maybe you're sure that maybe it develops when the baby has fingers, which is very early, or the heartbeat, very early, or when it can feel pain, which is also very early. Or maybe you think, well, when the baby looks more like a human, which is really subjective. There's a lot of people like us who say, I don't know a lot about medicine, and I don't actually have access to looking at the baby. I just see photos, and I read things that PhD people publish, and it's like, hey, that's most of us. So let's say you're not sure. With the box scenario, you would err on the side of caution. You'd say, well, it'd be nice to feel stronger, and it'd be nice to have that money, but I'm not sure if it's going to kill one of my family members, so I'm not going to do it, even if it's 50-50. What if it's only 10%? If you had a 10% chance of killing a close relative, you probably still wouldn't do it, because you err on the side of caution when protecting life. And so let's say you're one of the vast majority of people who just, you don't have a very finely tuned belief on when life begins. Err on the side of caution. You would in other hypothetical situations. Why not apply it here? And then there's the pro-lifers aren't feminist assertion, which I actually find kind of backwards. In life, you don't ask people to do hard things if you think they're weak and incompetent. Typically, you take the big asks, the big burdens, and you give them to the strong, the competent, the confident, those who have experience and wisdom. So to say to women, not directly but indirectly, carry your babies to term, and if you don't want them, give them up for adoption, is to say, do a hard thing. A pro-lifer is treating a woman with respect and saying, you can do this. You're not less than me. I'm not saying to a woman, well, this is really too hard for you, and so I understand when you want to give up and do something that's morally wrong. I think women are strong enough to do it. I think women are capable. And so we should err on the side of caution. Let's say you're not confident life began at conception, but maybe there's a 10% chance. Can I win you over to err on the side of caution? I think life begins at conception because I can't think of another time where it would be more obvious. Brain development. Have you seen a 1-year-old? Their brain's not fully developed. The heart, fingers, there's all sorts of very subjective feeling arguments. For the lack of a subjective argument, but with the presence of the heart of God defending the life of a baby in the womb, I don't know where else to say it begins but conception. If you're not sure, err on the side of caution. I really appreciate you watching all the way till the end. I know this is a difficult subject, and I think we as Christians can support both women in crisis and babies. I didn't call the UT Physics Lab, but I'm pretty sure that if I did, they would tell me, yes, you can do 2 things at the same time. We can do 2 things at the same time. We can advocate for women. We can pray for healthy pregnancies. We can advocate for the lives of babies. And when they're born and they don't have a family, we can sign up to take care of them. We can do all of those things. And I mean that as a community, not each individual person. Like I said earlier, there's not one person out there that can solve every problem. But you shouldn't have no longer a right to speak out against injustice. So advocate for women and advocate for babies. You can do both. It doesn't have to be either or. At the end of the day, it's a concern for human life, and it's a motivation based on love, and it's a desire to speak out for favor of truth and justice. It's not to be political or mean or weird or any other whole host of ideas that you may think that pro-lifers are pro-life, like why you think they're pro-life. The truth is, pro-lifers are pro-life because they really believe it's a life, and they really want to honor God, and they really want to do the right thing. And so, if you disagree, reach out to me. I could talk to you about it. But I encourage you to disagree respectfully, and before you do that, I strongly encourage you to think critically about these arguments that I gave you. Until then, I'll see you later. Thanks for watching.